All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and start this session for those who are in the room. Okay. Feel free to hang if you're here. If not, no worries. Our session, you might have seen on the schedule titled Community Service. We'll remix it a little bit. I'm going to tell you why that is in a moment. So, just a quick intro for anyone I haven't had a chance to meet. So, my name is Nina Nerman. I'm a sports psychiatrist based out of LA. I am an assistant professor of psychiatry at Columbia and the chief well-being officer at Athletes for Hope. And what I want to share with you today is something that has been really impactful for me. And I want to just ask you if you want to think about this for a quick moment. The last time that you can answer this question, that you did something for someone with absolutely no strings attached. I'll give you a little story this morning. I emailed somebody and said, hey, I'm going to do this thing for you. And their response was, it was a thing with no strings attached. It was going to be a thing that is essentially like a gift. And they're like, okay, in exchange for that, I want to do X, Y, Z. I was like, no, there was no exchange. This was not a strings thing. This was just a thing that you're going to get. And it kind of actually made me think about that generally, we are not used to having something, especially, I grew up in New York, so anytime that there's something that's going to be given to you, there's a catch, you're always very suspicious of things that are no strings attached. Feel free to respond to this verbally if you want, or just in your own head. When was the last time that either you had someone do this for you, give you something entirely with no strings attached, with no expectation, but you did it for someone else? And think a little bit about how that made you feel. How was the experience of doing that? Anything comes to mind that we want to share? Otherwise, it was fulfilling, right? There's something about it. I was like, oh, this is, because so much of what you do, right? You go get coffee, you're going to pay an amount of money, you're going to receive a thing. Almost everything we do is transactional, and I think especially for our athletes, this is why this conversation, to me, is a game changer for our athletes, because they are particularly in a transactional world. As we talked about these whole couple of days. You do well, you're treated well, you don't perform well, you fall off that pedestal real quick. Some of the data that we talked about in the past couple of days, we know this part, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the fact that things don't look great a lot of times. That we're seeing that athletes are struggling, I was talking to one of the guys who played in the NFL, that the pressures, all of these things that we've discussed, whether that's because of social media or loneliness or all these things that really impact them. And in particular, when we're seeing the anxiety levels and the depression levels, this is the part that we're familiar with. The part that I want to maybe show you that's a little bit different is going to be this question. Maybe we had a session yesterday that Emmett moderated about NIL. Maybe part of what's difficult for us is this is a little double word problem. Sprout 2 was coming out, so this is the meme I thought of. When me and my best friend are thinking, everyone wants to be us. The little main character energy that we live in. I recently moved to LA, and I experienced this diagnosis. I'm very familiar with this main character syndrome. Where everyone you walk into and you find is the main character in their own movie, the main character in their own story. And it's not bad to a degree, but part of what's difficult, I think, for our athletes, I read a book once that had a really good starting line that just said it's not about you. That's not a message that a star athlete hears on a collegiate level, not a message that a professional player hears, and not a message even a clinician hears, to be honest with you. A lot of times we think of, and I would even say further, so I'm a psychiatrist, right? In our psychiatric training, the guy who was the grandfather of all stuff, our guy Siggy Freud, was just, everything was about me, and my mom. You lay on the couch, tell me about your mom, tell me about you. What I want to try to introduce for us in the next few minutes that we have together is a potential antidote. The reason we frame this session as a forgotten medicine is a potential antidote to this NIL performance. I don't use the C word sparingly here, but it really is something that's eroding at the heart of our athletes. And this potential medicine can change that if we embrace it. I was not going to be at a sports conference and not going to chance to talk about the Knicks. Okay, if anyone here is not Michigan, trust me, there's a tie into what we're talking about. But just RIP to the Atlanta Hawks who lost yesterday by 50 points to the New York Knicks. It's all important data. I'm sorry, this is all part of the talk. I promise. Anyone know who this is? A young man named Jeremy Lin, who was the last guy on the bench. This guy was sitting so far on the bench, people thought he was like a towel boy. Okay, people were like, no, there's no way this guy's on the team. People would check his ID when he walked in the garden. Like, you're not an actual basketball player, bro. Let's be real. Because he never played. He was so far on the bench. And then he became this sensation a couple of years ago. It's a really great documentary about him, of being from a place of being so far off the bench, never seeing the court, to being the guy in Madison Square Garden, in the Mecca of basketball. And he was at a place where, when that happened to this young man, he was sleeping on his friend's couch. Imagine being a professional basketball player, crashing on your boy's couch, because you don't know if you're going to play basketball tomorrow. And he talks about how the identity and the shift for him was thinking less actually about himself. Was coming outside of himself in that frame and not thinking about the coach and the audience and the garden and all of this stuff outside of himself. And just he thought of actually an audience of one was a really great phrase that he used. He, I think, is one example of a model of what athletes oftentimes will lose in the course of becoming the main character energy, of becoming the spotlight that is overly so. All the things we talked about the past couple of days, if you see these sessions: identity, connection, purpose. My argument or my presentation for you for this afternoon is this: if there was a medicine, so I prescribe a lot of medications. That's my day-to-day thing. If there was a medicine that could outperform Lexapro, if there was a medicine that could outperform, your favorite SSRI. I saw a clip this morning about a couple of great artists talking about their favorite medications they've taken. So, that's very enlightened. It was Kalani and a couple of others who are sort of on the radio. I'm going to offer you the opportunity for the next few minutes that we have together. Does anybody here prescribe medicine? Anybody a clinician? Would you want to prescribe something that is not pharmaceutical, no side effect, but potentially very impactful? That's my hope for us, that by the end, we're all able to prescribe a forgotten medicine. So you walk out of the session and be like, oh, you guys, you missed it. I'm now prescribing stuff. Not able to, but I can. Here's the wound that we're going to try to solve in this forgotten medicine from the things that we've discussed already. We see the identity loss, or disconnection, or loss of purpose that an athlete can have when they get lost in the performance, when they get lost in the meet. So what do we do about it? I want you to actually, maybe if you have somebody next to you, or if you're by yourself, think about this only internally. What did it feel like to you when you helped someone with the gift part, when you were given a gift? The reason I say the gift part, or when you got something with no strings attached, there was a great session this morning about spirituality. In a lot of spiritual traditions, the divine is thought of as self-gift. And God himself is thought of as a self-gift to humanity. So one of the ways that we do a very divine act, actually, in the life of others, is to be a self-gift to others. So reflect with me for a quick second. Maybe turn to somebody if they're next to you, or think for yourself if you want to share. What was the feeling when you helped someone in their moment of need? It was either the right thing at the right time for the right reason. How did that impact you? And the part that I want to unpack for us a little bit is maybe that warm and fuzzy feeling that you got is also neuroscience based. Maybe that feeling that you got did something neurochemically in your brain. Anyone want to share kind of an experience or a feeling? Just someone workshopping, but I know we're not used to workshopping this. I heard fulfilled before yet.
I would say it's a warm feeling inside where you feel a sense of accomplishment. I was also driven. So anytime you can actually see the impact it has,
I love that. When you can see the impact, you see the result, you see something good happening in someone else's life, that's beautiful. Anyone else want to share? Yeah. Go. Yeah.
Just when you are helping other folks, you're getting how much you have to offer,
Mm.
so you're not in kind of deficit headspace.
Ah.
You're thinking about kind of assets you raise in a given moment, and then you improve the condition of somebody else, you can see that, and know you participate in that, so it's just kind of another, like multiple layers of a boost.
That's so beautiful. Really well said, right? As opposed to if I'm scrolling through Instagram or other socials, I'm thinking about all the things that I don't have that someone else does. As opposed to thinking if I'm serving or helping or being a part of someone else, there's a natural way of thinking about what I have that I'm offering. It's beautiful. Love that. Was there someone on the side? Yeah. Pride, yeah, this is like, oh, this is good. Yeah.
Prideful, you feel like you're needed, and you feel like you're supporting and that you're helping someone feel something that they need to do, so it's an accomplishment.
I love it. I love it. There's a sense of accomplishment that you're doing something good for others. Here's the part where I think is going to get a little bit more interesting. So far, not earth-shattering stuff, right? If we say to each other, wow, doing good for other people feels good. Fantastic. No one's going to argue with you and say, no, doing good stinks. The part that's more interesting for us on a sort of biological level is, can you see this in the brain? Is there a neuroscience, you know how, anybody here a runner, or at least like, I know you've run before, but like anybody experience the idea of like a runner's high? A man back there, runner. You know there's a phenomenon that we're going to unpack a little bit, not the runner's high, but a helper's high. Have you heard this phrase before? Helper's high? Good, I just did it. I'm just kidding. We want to understand a little bit because if I'm going to make a case to go from, you know how every single one of us professionally, at some point, did some kind of volunteer or something for other people because that's what you do. It's an extracurricular activity. The question that I'm going to have, in order to move us from extracurricular activity to medicine, is a big jump. It's an admittedly huge jump. Because if we end the session and we feel like doing nice things is nice, great, then that's happening. But if we somehow end the session with you feeling like doing nice things is medicinal, that's huge. So I'm going to try to make that argument for you. First, with the brain. There's a really good study that looked at, can you see this? They started looking at fMRIs, right? These images of the brain that can measure blood flow. And they said, can you see an impact in the mesolimbic system, in the reward system? That warm and fuzzy feeling, can you track how this is moving parts of the brain? He said, yes. Can you reinforce this, the PFC, the prefrontal cortex? Can you see this changing decision making? Can you see this being a part of what's integrated into the brain in that way? Not only triggered by writing a check. I'm not saying here, cut the check for Orbs. But there's something about here that, fascinatingly, doing good is good for the brain. Doing good is brain science. Not the way we usually think about doing good. That's not the way typically when we talk about volunteer work, it's like, well, this is, again, it's a nice thing, it's a photo op. But if you were to think about this as neuroprotective, if you were to think about this as one of the investments into your own brain, and when they broke it down a little bit further in other studies, they looked at, well, what is it about this? What is it about donating time as opposed to money? Going back to the things that we were talking about for athletes, you guys probably know this as well as I do. One of the biggest complaints that athletes will have, especially in the NIL age, and also professionals, is everybody around you has their hand out somehow. Everybody expects to benefit something from you. So you don't know what's a genuine relationship because everyone wants to get something from you. And when you're doing something to build connection on a neuronal level, that is not going to be based on what someone will get from me, but just by me being present. Presence kind of becomes a prescription. And this is what I really love about the helper's high. They're able to track this on a neurochemical level. All of these endorphins that get released on a run, or oxytocin that gets released in maternal bonding, serotonin and dopamine that we also measure. It's really impactful in a different framing of a shift here. When you think that, have you ever thought about this for yourself? If I'm gonna go spend time doing something for someone else for free of my time, that's me taking my serotonin medication for the day. This is me, the oxytocin that comes out. I know for me, when I think about like the most formative experiences of my life, in college or later on, when I did something with someone else and we were both serving for the sake of it. And when you can track this, when you can know that the same chemicals that we are trying so desperately to change and measure and grow through medication and exercise and mindfulness and therapy and all that stuff, and this could be something that can do that too. Helpers high being a real thing. One of my favorite talks was from Dr. Smith yesterday. That keynote was incredible. And he teed up Muhammad Ali, which is, this is one of the coldest pictures in sports history, as we all know. Besides being like dominant and a champion and just like an inspiring figure for many, many ways, he was part of a group that started this thing called Athletes for Hope. Started a group, a nonprofit 20 years ago that said, we want to make sure athletes get involved in the community. And he started rallying people, started going on campus, leading workshops. You're Muhammad Ali, you don't have to do any of that stuff. Why would you spend your time? You don't have to do that. Like, you can just kick back, do a cameo, people do whatever they do. I love this one from him. He said, like, this is like the rent you pay for the room on this earth. This is what it means for us to live together. Like, you know that phrase when you're talking about a kid, like, that it takes a village to raise a child? If we think about the athletic village being the pros that retired, the pros that are playing, the collegiate, and the younger, sort of all across the spectrum. One of the most beautiful things that we can do, that I see, for the mental health of the collegiate player, is to help them share mental health for a younger person. Same for the professional. We were on a call with some of the leagues around the country, and each of them were like, we can't really engage the players to talk about their own mental health, but we can get them to talk about the mental health of younger people. There's something about them that took them outside of them to be able to share with younger people. I threw in as much data as I possibly can in this presentation because I wanted for myself to go beyond that this is a nice thing to something that is essential. So there's a good quote here. Professor UMass said, volunteers they wound up in this study with less depression, less anxiety, higher self-esteem, higher life satisfaction, greater happiness, greater sense of meaning in life. Of all the things, I was talking with one of the players who was here and left. When you're in the league or when you're competing on a really high level and you want to think about what's something that's going to outlive me or outlast me, a lot of things people want to talk about is actually impact beyond the sport that they played. In this study, took a 6-week service learning sort of initiative. And when they measured this before and after, and when they saw specifically in this age group 18 to 25, and it wasn't surprising when you read the study that they were able to see an improvement across so many different domains of life. But what's surprising to me is that when we're looking at mental health interventions on college campuses, we're going to talk to different campuses that have all the money in the world because you're in a big, huge conference, or campuses that don't really have much at all and your budget's strapped. I can't think of a cheaper and more effective intervention, a cheaper and more effective medicine that you can use on a college campus to impact mental health than one that will give you this kind of impact. Anybody ever read this book? It's a beautiful book written by a psychologist named Albert Rossi. And in this book, he argued, or he presented, or he showed something that I think is part of the crux for us today, part of what our college athletes wind up missing is what it means to be a healing presence for other people. Not because you're doing something, not because you're giving money or an autograph or whatever, but by your actual presence, you actually become something that is healing for other people. There was one panel earlier that talked about grief in life of athletes. You guys probably experienced this, you've lived enough life to see. When someone goes through a difficult experience, what's the best thing to say? When there's a tragic situation in their life, what's the right thing to say to a person? I understand. Anything else is like the right thing to say? What's the best thing to say? You guys are all skilled people in the room. Give me a cheat sheet. Best thing to say.
Say nothing.
Nothing. Yeah, thank you. Sometimes, and you've been there for your own difficulty, right? When you had something go totally get derailed, are you looking for some magical platitude? That's you think, oh, thank you, I never thought of that. Sometimes it's just, and you're actually there for a person. So that's part of what we see in our athletes too. Part of what the most powerful thing that I see is not so much when an athlete comes and speaks to a couple of like middle school kids with some powerful, inspiring word, but what does it mean for them to become a healing presence? We'll talk a few minutes about how we implement this. Similar 3 P's to what we're discussing with Dr. Smith, but a little bit different. The presence piece, because the first part, I think, for our conversation is saying, I agree. I acknowledge that yes, service or volunteer work is medicinal. Okay, you got it. The fMRIs are good. The helper's high with the neurotransmitters. I agree. I'm with it. But the second thing is actually how you do this is as important as the why you do it. Because the how, first, showing up with your actual full self is easier said than done. One practical way that we do this when we walk with a group of athletes into a volunteer activity, for example, is like do this crazy radical thing. Are you guys familiar with this new update on phones? That they have an off button. Did you guys know? This is a very radical iPhone 27 invention that you can turn off phones. And we invite our college athletes. They're like, I've never done that before. I know, the world will explode without you knowing what happened on X for 5 minutes. So we invite them to be fully present. And we lead them through that through no distractions. So, for the next half an hour, you're here and you're only here. And some of them, actually, let me get to the side. There was a really interesting study, I didn't put it in this presentation, but I'm curious to see what you think would happen here. They did this, as psychological studies tend to be a little weird, they locked people up in a room, and they said for 15 minutes, there's no stimulus whatsoever. There's no phone, there's no, right, you've heard of this? It's a real thing. There's nothing. Like, you can't just instinctively reach for the only thing you can do, the only one thing that you can do, which is shock yourself. So you can inflict physical pain or be in absolute solitude for 16 minutes. What do you think was that? Some people, more than half the people, especially men for some reason, took the pain. I'd rather be in physical pain than be in silence. I'd rather be in physical pain than be in non-noise. Our athletes are suffering from noise. You guys know this as well as I do. Giving them an opportunity to say there is no noise for the next half an hour is in itself therapeutic for them. To be bodily present, to be mentally present, to be emotionally present. It's huge. And it's something that our athletes tell us, this is the only time of my week where I'm not, I don't feel like I have, one person told me this, I thought it was really good. I don't feel like I have 20 tabs open. They didn't have any tabs open. They were just like, all I have is this tab. That's it. It's this thing. And obviously when they're competing, they have that to a degree. So I'm singly focused on my competition. The second one is purpose alignment. This is actually really important too, because when you go from the gym, you know how, this is May 1st, Mental Health Awareness Month, right? Mental health is this huge umbrella that means 10,000 things. We gotta go beyond that a little bit deeper to say mental health for who, for what, in what way, what context, nuance. Service is another one of those things that is like a huge umbrella to say, but for you, how does that idea align with you specifically? So helping an athlete say, you really care about, I had one athlete who told me, one of the most formative experiences of my life is when my family member got arrested. And I had to visit him in prison. I want to volunteer with justice involved young people. Amazing. Let's facilitate that. Let's make sure that we can get you to a place where you're visiting juvenile justice situations as an athlete to be able to share some hope and inspiration. It resonated particularly so, right? Some athletes say, I really care about young people. I have one young person who's like, I really love books. Good for you, kid. So he said once, I want to make sure that we can help kids read. So like on TikTok, no, I can realize I want to help kids read. Good. So figuring out ways to purpose align the time. This is the same way that when I'm prescribing a medicine, part of what I have to think about is what's the right medicine, the right person, at the right time. And lastly, because again, by the end of this, we're all prescribing this as a medicine. When you're going to prescribe this, we got to figure out the right dose. The right dose or the right protocol. Sometimes when we, like again, I'll tell you for me, as I'm a practicing clinician, I prescribe people all kinds of stuff. Sometimes I'll prescribe somebody community. I'll say, if you're going to take this medicine once a day, but on Friday, you got to go to that thing. I'm going to write it down for you, I'll write it down on a script pad. Okay, I got a lot of them. Sometimes I'll prescribe a spiritual intervention. Say, you were part of a faith community. You got to go to that thing on Sunday. Sometimes I'll prescribe. One of the most evidence-based, it's a little bit part of the protocol, one of the most evidence-based interventions that has been looked at in randomized control trials is forgiveness. I'll prescribe forgiveness. So you got to take a look at the person and say, how do we forgive? So when you're prescribing this protocol, help outline for them, I want to be able to think about once a quarter, once a year, one time, once a week, so that I can see how I can measure the dose of my prescription. And sometimes I say the literal writing down piece, because we all kind of respond to things that are written down a little bit differently than if it was like general advice given to a friend in the ether. Steph is somebody who's on our leadership council of this nonprofit called Athletes for Hope. And he talks about a general thing, okay, community support has been very helpful for me, and he wants to make sure that's an important thing for him. Sometimes athletes, hey, they're billion-dollar moguls, and they're going to do volunteer work because it's good for the growth, right? It's good pictures, it's good things. What always strikes me is when some of these athletes are doing things that people don't even hear about, and doing things in person themselves, not their whole team, and it's like, why is that something that's important to you? I had a chance to spend time with his family, and his mom talked about, this is something that I made sure that he knew when he was in middle school. It was like, your life is not about you. You and your brother are going to go and play basketball, do the things, but you're first a servant of other people, and then you're a basketball player. It's always the one. Yeah, good stuff. As a prescriber, you always got to think about contraindications too, right? Can't be prescribing people stuff, and then they get allergic, and they sue you. So because you guys are going to be good prescribers by the end of the session, you also have to think about contraindications, because you know what you don't want to do? People sometimes accuse us of this in the mental health world if we talk about interventions that are non-medicine, of like toxically positive, right? We talk about a little bit of positive psychology. We're not talking about, hey, like I have some very dedicated athletes who hear this message about like the thing that's going to cure all mental health issues is the gym. If you just work out, you're going to be good. If you just do this, you're going to be good. You just do it. So for us, we're going to guard against that. I'm not telling you service is going to save the world exclusively, because we've got to think about where a person is, right? And what you don't want to do, similar to the platitude idea when somebody has a difficult situation, in an acute crisis, right? When there's something that's like, I'm not in a place right now where I'm emotionally in a place where I can give, I can be there for others, that's all right. It's all right for us to be able to say, let's regroup, let's make sure that you're feeling good, you're in a place where you're emotionally healthy, before we go out and serve other people. So taking a moment for us to think about contraindications, same way that we would for medicine. A coerced service, what I mean by that is we don't want to make people feel like this is a guilt trip, right? If you only do things about you and you don't do anything for other people, then I have never believed, both in positive behavior and clinically, that guilt is a strong motivator. I think what's a strong motivator for people is the positive outcome. So not making things, we do things that are all volunteer for our athletes, that are all voluntary and not mandatory. And the last piece is helper burnout. Because similar to, one of the things I love that I came up with over the past 2 days here, is thinking more for our athletes about who they are as opposed to what they do. And we don't want people to identify with that I am a helper. This can be the case for any clinicians in the room too. Part of the reason that you may find yourself drawn to this Superman situation of always saving others or helping others or being the one to rescue people. We're not trying to rescue people, and we're not trying to become a superhero. We are trying to be in a place where this becomes a natural outflow of who we are. And that's the same for our athletes. We want them to become people who are giving of themselves, and somehow that fills them. That's kind of the mystery in the data. Gabby is another person who we've had some sessions together where, you guys know Gabby Thomas, right? She's one of the most insightful, or emotionally insightful people that I've seen. Maybe that was the Harvard training, maybe it was just for all her life experience. But she was able to serve, like something I really loved hearing her speak is the magnitude is not the issue. Sometimes we think, I had a patient actually tell me this last week. We were discussing all kinds of prescriptions that I gave him in his life, right? One of which was medicine, one of which was whatever. And he said, Doc, I get it, that's cute, but I'm just some guy in California. If I do something, that's not really going to make an impact in the world. Let's be honest, I'm just some guy. I'm just a 20-year-old kid. And what Gabby said, and what I've seen, and probably you guys have seen as well, is the way that we measure impact is not always on a spreadsheet. The way that we measure the magnitude of how significant something is not always the way it shows up on an Instagram feed. You can probably think of examples in your own life as I can in mine. Almost okay. Thank you so much. So we'll wrap up here. Of something that was seemingly small, but wound up being incredibly impactful for you. The right conversation, the right acknowledgement, the right moment can be really huge. So the last thing, so I want to leave a moment for questions if you have. This is basically behavioral activation. What we talked about, but neurological, it's the neurobiological, is the one. So if you're going to think about doing this, perhaps wherever you are, think about the barrier to having this be a clinical intervention. Think about the reframe, not coming back and saying, hey, we should do service on our campus, but rather, how can this be a free, effective, neurobiological medicine that I can employ? I'll leave you with this quote. Anybody ever see Dead Poets Society? Fantastic movie. And there's two quotes that I'm going to, one is from him and one from a really great writer that I love. It says here, we don't read, and this also applies to service for me. We don't read and write poetry because it's cute. We don't serve because it's cute. We read and write poetry because the members of the human race, and that human race is filled with passion. Medicine, law, business, engineering, these are all noble pursuits necessary to sustain life. But poetry, beauty, romance, love, service, community, that's what we stay alive for. Another author put it this way, friendship is unnecessary. like philosophy, like art, it has no survival value. But it's these things that give value to survival. For our athletes and for us in the room, when we think about things that are going to give our lives, give our survival value, this is one of those things that really comes to mind for me. Questions? That was the last go. Questions around the why, the how, or where on this. Yes?
What have you seen as you're prescribing this as some of the barriers that are coming back? I mean, I kind of feel like these economic habits.
Yes.
Perceptions of the things, I guess I'm curious what you've seen and maybe give us like workarounds of that.
Yeah, great question. Barriers. I'll tell you two quick barriers that I see. There is, you know how oftentimes in therapy, you hear about the first layer? So the first layer of barrier, when we're talking about this, when I'm talking about this with an athlete or with a patient, it's like, I'm busy, I don't have time, I got all kinds of. And what that's telling me sometimes is we haven't really cracked the why yet. Because you make time for things that are significant and meaningful. So first, when you're encountering a barrier, whatever language you're speaking to, this is an administrator or an individual, if the first resistance is like, we have something going on, and budget, and time, blah, 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 then the evidence base is not quite there yet. So the administrator might have to give them a few studies. I have to show them an fMRI. For the person, the one-on-one, it's going them beyond the why of like, hey, listen, let me give you other examples. You know, I was working with a guy in the NFL, and when we did this is how it impacted them. You want to be like that guy? You're a college player, you want to go to the pros? So you gotta make it a time. After that, there's a little bit of a logistical issue. I'm like, okay, maybe you don't have to be the one to come up with this stuff. Let's link you up with someone who's gonna take care of it. But the harder one for me is always the first one. If I have the why on board and I'm bought in, the second logistical part is actually easy. I can always link you up with someone who's gonna do the legwork, get you there, easy peasy. But it's a great thing when you're thinking about marriage for sure. Are we time? Maybe not good time. All right, guys. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank y'all so much for staying present and being here. We'll transition. We got 2 more sessions left. Please hang around if you can. I don't have to schedule in front of me, but you can refresh the QR code. I know we talked about NIL and Carlos was consistent. If y'all want to come through. And please grab some lunches.
Nice to meet you. I'm Rosetta Sandiego,
Oh,
my sister, clinicians.
Yeah.
Your holistic approach to
Absolutely.
prescribing it as a medicine service. It's beautiful. That was beautiful.
Thanks so much.
That was so good. It's good because people don't understand how things connected,
Yes.
especially with our nervous system and our gut balance and everything. It's so connected, and it's like, go out and do something nice for someone else. Stop thinking about yourself. Stop being so caught up in your own world.
Right.
Like, people have bigger issues, and support something like that so you can look back at yourself and be more, show more gratitude for what you have.
Hey, how you doing?
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Oh, thank you. Yeah, let's
I'm like, I want this. We're in San Diego, LA, Vancouver, all of them. Yeah. I'm like, ooh, we need,
Right? I was like, we need to get to contact information.
yeah, they're like,
Okay, we'll definitely connect.
Please. Yes.
yeah, I think we really value it. We weren't really paying attention to the schedule and kind of just landed here, but I'm glad we did.
Me too.
Hey there.
How are you?
Jake, good to meet you. I've seen you speak today and yesterday. I just love what y'all are doing. I mean, get out of yourself and go serve the community. It's fantastic. Yeah.
It goes a long way.
Yeah, it does. And that's kind of what we're built on too. So I wanted to give you my card. I'd
Here, let
love
me
to
grab
connect.
this guy.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Where are you based out of?
Fantastic. Houston, right here.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'd love to talk more and get to know you better.
Definitely.